All right, welcome back to another Wright podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
I am Brian Wright, still here in not speaker studio.
Nope, I'm wearing out speaker studio, just making the most of it, making the most of it, and enjoying my time here. Love this, love the speakers. So Brian, the hot stove is cooling down a little bit. A lot of free agent signings in Major League Baseball. There's a handful of big free agents still out there, though, and we're waiting to see where they land to kind of fill out some rosters. And spring training is just a couple weeks away. Pitchers are reporting soon, position players soon after that. And some of these guys need to find a home. Some of those players on the list: Alex Bregman, Jack Flaherty, Carlos Estevez, Alex Verdugo, Max Scherzer. But the one that seems to be getting really the most attention is the polar bear, Pete Alonso from the New York, or formerly from the New York Mets. Still could be a Met, but there's been rumors that he could be a Met again. The Jays have been linked to him, but apparently he rejected one of their offers or rejected their offer. The Yankees, the Astros, the Mariners all been linked to his name. What are you thinking, Brian? Pete Alonso, a great talent?
I think he is a modern day, very good, power hitter. Somebody hits between really 230, 240, 250, 260. Typically has 35 plus home runs. He's the modern day. He had some really long points of dryness last year where he was, pretty dry, but he came on towards the end, had some big hits. You can't tell me with Soto around him, his numbers don't get better. I kind of think he should sign like a 1 year deal, with Soto around him, and then tear it up and then renegotiate, because I think I've heard 3 years, $70 million. You mentioned earlier to me that they had offered him in 2023, 2022, like 158 million. Who knows the length?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the length. So it's it's one of those things. I think Boris, his agent, is an awesome agent, and he typically gets guys his money. But I think guys have to be willing to leave. I think Boris' number one priority is money, not necessarily location.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's a tough dynamic. Paul, answer me this. You went through free agency. And so,
I did. No, clearly not to this level at all. Yeah,
but what was it like? Like, were there a number of teams? Obviously, you were originally drafted, and then you ended up with some Phillies for a little bit, and with the Red Sox for a little bit, I think. So tell me, kind of what was your thought process, your agent, that conversation?
Yeah. So I was drafted by the Brewers, and so when you sign a standard 6-year agreement. So you're property of that organization for the 6 years. So the Brewers had me for 6 years. I was on the 40-man for one of those. My last year before my free agent year, I had a really good season. Had a really good year, and so I asked the Brewers. I said, "Hey, could just put me back on the 40-man? I thought I deserved it."
And tell people what that means when you are on the 40-man.
So on the 40-man, you're protected on the roster. You get to go to big league camp. It generally means you're somebody that they see as a legitimate prospect and somebody that could help the big club in the short kind of term future. So that was kind of my ask. Hey, put me back on the 40-man. It was, at the time, I think it was like 55, 60,000 a year ish to be like second year 40-man, not in the big leagues. So it's good money for minor leagues, but not you're not raking it in and retiring on that. So that was my ask. The Brewers said, "Hey, no, we got some other guys we want to put on there." And looking back in retrospect, those guys didn't really, pan out. I guess I didn't pan out either, if you're looking at it. But some other guys, and so you get to a certain date. I think it was like November 15th or so, November 1st. I can't remember the exact date, but you become that free agent, and all the teams can start calling. So I was really fortunate that first year. I had 5 or 6 teams calling the first day. The Brewers were negotiating, and they came in with I think like $4,000 a month or something like that, and great. Like, I'd been making like $1,800 a month, so
it was better, but not what the market was really.
Yeah, kind of exciting. But then I remember the Twins called, and then it ended up kind of coming down to the Red Sox and Dodgers my first year as a free agent.
Hey, I got a question in that. Hey, Paul, was your decision made off of money or opportunity, how quick you could get to the big leagues?
A little bit of both. So it was kind of cool, right? It was almost like being recruited again.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the Dodgers and Red Sox were kind of coming at me the most. And my agent was kind of talking. So my agent was Rick Oliver. He was with Shapiro and Robinson out of Baltimore. So they represented like a lot of Orioles. So Cal Ripken and a lot of Orioles from that time. And Kirby Puckett was one of those guys. So they came to me in high school, and technically they were weren't my agent because you couldn't say they were an agent at the time, but
Advisor.
advisors, what they were called. Yeah. So they negotiated my original contract with the Brewers. So Rick was doing a lot of this, and we were going back and forth. And so that was part of it. So my wife and I, we were kind of looking at, so the Dodgers AAA was in Las Vegas. The Red Sox AAA was in Pawtucket. The Dodgers, actually, Tommy Lasorda called me, like kind of to recruit. He's like, "We'd love to see you in Dodger blue, Paul." Like, I was like, "Man, like, Tommy,
That's hard to turn down there.
that's pretty cool." Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Red Sox. So both teams offered good money. So the Red Sox offered $11,000 a month, and the Dodgers was 11,500 a month. I wanted to be a Brewer. Like, honestly, like that was my people. Those were who drafted me. That was, and it just felt like such a slap in the face that they weren't even close. Like, not even close. And then the Red Sox also said, "Hey, we'll give you a $25,000 signing bonus." I mean, being a broke minor leaguer for a few years, like,
All of a sudden, you get close to 100 grand probably throughout a
yeah,
year.
that kind of put it over the edge. And then that was the '03 season. But both the Dodgers and Red Sox were in contention for the pennant. That was the year that um, the Grady Little, where he left Pedro in too long in the playoffs, and the Yankees ended up beating them. And so I got to know a lot of those guys with the Red Sox. So I mean, don't regret the decision at all. You can kind of play armchair quarterback and look back. Oh, what if I went to the Dodgers? What would have happened then? And maybe we go to Vegas and I become a gambler, and I'm
But I would
living in the
imagine
streets.
in
I don't know.
Vegas, the air is thin out there. I imagine it's harder to pitch out there. I
The ball,
mean,
yeah. So I had played in some thin-aired stadiums in the California League, and it was terrible. And that was probably part of the decision as well. I remember how terrible it was to pitch like kind of those desert scenarios. And
right.
it was not fun, man.
Ball is flying.
Balls flying over the place, yeah. And again, both. Yeah, got to know a lot of the folks on the Red Sox who were part of that '04 team who won the series and broke the curse, and pitched in a couple actually one spring training game with the Red Sox I wasn't at big league camp. They would have guys come up, and got to know Grady Little a little bit because he's the North Carolina guy. So yeah, man. So that was free agency for me. Again, we were talking like 10, 11, 12,000. We weren't talking millions of millions. But
It's all relative, though. I feel like it's all relative, and it's interesting that I wonder what the number was from the Blue Jays for Pete, right? Circling it back around. So whenever you think about Pete, I wonder if he has kind of the same feelings, like he wants to be playing. It seems like he wants to be a Met. The opportunity from Toronto comes, he turns it down really quickly. You wonder if it was competitive a little bit more because it feels like almost any team would need a guy like him. Somebody who's going to hit 35 to a great year would probably be 45 home runs, 230 to probably 260. Typically going to flirt with that 100 RBI. He can play DH, obviously, can play first base. And it seems like almost every team with a DH being in both leagues, almost every team could use a guy like Pete.
Yeah. And so career average is 249. He broke the rookie record, hit 53 home runs, had 16 in the second. That was the COVID year, had 16. That was a shortened season. But he's at 37, 40, 46, and 34 home runs in his full seasons. Again, 260, 231, 262, 271. A decent enough average in today's
But
game,
it's the
especially,
modern day. It's the modern day kind of thought process, Polly, where average is really. It's definitely not the first three stats you look at, I don't think, anymore. You're looking at those power numbers. You're probably looking at RBIs. You're looking at on base percentage, slugging.
Yeah, we saw that chart the other day, and the top salaries were first base, DH, right field, right? Because and if traditionally baseball, those are just the three power hitting positions in a traditional lineup. So hey, kids out there, when your coach says, "Hey, go play right field," don't see it as, "Hey, man, they're putting me in right field. See it as, hey, I've probably got a pretty good arm. I can probably run and move a little bit, and maybe I've got a little juice in my bat, right?
Yeah.
So that is a big thing with kids when you stick them in the outfield. Parents or especially at the younger levels, like, oh, my kid's in the outfield. Man, when you think about the greatest players of all time ever, Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Barry Bonds, Mike Trout in the current day, Aaron Judge, King Griffey Jr., they're all outfielders. Like the best players
Yeah.
of all time, they're all outfielders because they're great athletes. They can move, they can run. So don't, kids, if you're listening, playing the outfield is fun. It's great. Enjoy it. Go out there and enjoy it.
And
So,
I think ultimately it's changing about this age, right? I see it coaching middle school, and I'm
yeah.
starting to see like, these kids, and some of these kids are in eighth grade, and so they realize that they
Yeah.
just want to
Well,
have a chance to get on the
once you get to
field.
that level, it definitely like I mean, you're making key plays. You're out there diving around, making great
The
throws.
field gets bigger, and it's that
Yeah.
much more important, right? Once you get to a full size outfield. Bregman, dude, what's the story with him? It feels like he's an Astro. He feels like kind of a pillar of those runs they've had.
Yeah.
I've watched some stories on him on YouTube. He had a cameraman following him for a couple years, or at least last off season, and he very likable guy. The numbers speak for themselves. Playing a pretty key position and not a big guy really, not a big guy. One of those guys that always clearly had really strong hands, really tight swing. Is really into kind of the details of how his swing works, which most of these guys are once you make it to this level. But it was interesting to kind of hear his thought process. If you ever look at YouTube and Google, he was really trying to change some things last year, and almost went back to his kind of his old swing the second half, and he really got back on fire.
Yeah.
And I do think he's going to be. I think he's going to be an Astro, but
Yeah.
they have found some guys there.
And he's been an Astro for 9 years. He's out of LSU, got to the big leagues in 2016. But you're right. I mean, if you look back at the playoffs and World Series, the Astros have been in there every year. And clearly there was some controversy around a couple of those years and what was going on. But you're right, Brian. It just feels like a pillar, just a staple in that lineup, and been a great hitter. Career average 272. But always, in that kind of 20 range, home runs at 41 1 year, lots of doubles, and just a tough out, man. So
I
I'm
wonder.
not sure.
I wonder what. I'm sure some baseball nerd somewhere does this, but I wonder what his stats would be like. That left field porch.
Short, yeah.
It looks really, really short. I wonder what it would be if he was somewhere else. But clearly a really good hitter. Clearly wants to
Yeah.
be there. He still feels like. But you mentioned this a couple episodes back. The days of guys playing well without steroids, much past 35,
Yeah.
seem to be less and less and less.
Yeah.
And so if he's year 9, he's a college guy. He's got to be 31, 32.
Well,
And so
he's
he's got to
30,
be.
so both him and Alonso are both 30 years old. They're
Alonso
pretty,
feels older to me. He
yeah.
feels older. That's interesting.
Bregman will be 31 when the season starts. His March 30th birthday, and Alonso's just turned 30. So
That's my son. Yeah, that's funny. Same birthday. Maybe we
there you
can
go.
share some hitting tips.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, if he becomes just kind of a fraction of the hitter Bregman is, he'll be doing okay, man.
Doing all right, dude. And an athlete. That's what I think people, when you look at Bregman, he's a total player, right? He's a kind of a complete package.
Yeah.
I mean, a really good third baseman, a really good arm, kind of plays. He typically your third baseman has some length and some size, but he makes it up with that.
He's 6 foot, $190 is what he's listed at. So
I'm saying there's an inch and a half that is not. I'm guessing. I've only seen him once in spring training.
Yeah.
He's not 6 foot. I don't think.
So
if I'm 6 foot, he's not 6 foot.
So tell me about that, bro. All right, because I've got a pretty good story around this. So these kind of things matter. These measurables.
Oh yeah, I've got one
matter.
too. I've got one too. You go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm legitimately no shoes on, 6'5.5".
Yeah.
I usually list myself 6'5", 6'6". In the basketball program at high school, I was listed at 6'7".
Yeah.
That's what Coach Gray did. So it didn't bother me the way it didn't matter. But so I played with Ben Sheets for a couple of years. So Ben Sheets went to Northeast Louisiana. It's now called University of Louisiana at Monroe. But he
Oh
was a
yeah.
first round pick through low mid 90s. Had one of the best curveballs I've ever seen in person, and could throw that pitch like he did his fastball, control it. Really good fastball. And so Sheets was a short guy, like baseball, relative to baseball, probably 5'10" and a half, maybe. But so he would, when the scouts were coming to his house and to check him out his junior year in college, they said, "Hey, we want to measure you." He's like, "Okay," and he would wear Air Maxes, like with
It
the
gives you an inch at least, if not inch and a
give him,
half.
and so he always measured out at 6 foot, and they'd say, "Hey, take your shoes off." He's like, "No, like we need you to take your shoes off." He's like, "I'm not going to do it," and he's like, "When's the last time I pitched with my shoes off?"
Fair.
And I was like, "That's valid, right?" So he always measured out at 6 foot because he would wear those Air Maxes, and I guess that's what they measured him at. But he was made a great point. But again, those if you're 6 foot in the draft, that could give you a couple slots up, could give you, which means at the time a couple $100,000, and so I mean, as silly as it seems, those little things do matter, right? So
Yeah, and I was the same way. I always put 6'1" on all my stuff, but I'm right at 6 foot, right at 6 foot barefoot, And so I put 6'1" on everything. And I'll say this: your best hitters in the history of the game are 5'10" to 6 foot.
Ben Sheets is actually listed at 6'1" on Baseball Reference.
And he's not 6'1". Obviously, you saw it.
He was my roommate in spring training in 2000. No, yeah, I saw him a lot.
Right.
Was not 6'1". I did that, but
yeah, so I had 6'1" on mine. But the thing of it is, traditionally, your best, and it may change because we see it with our kids. Kids are getting bigger, but traditionally, your best hitters were 5'10" to about 6'1", 6'2" max. Rarely, Aaron Judge is really the anomaly. You had Frank Thomas and Winfield, some of those guys back in those days that were bigger guys.
Remember Richie Sexton was like 6'6",
bigger guy. Yeah,
you see some of those guys get to like Albert Bell felt pretty big, but I think he was like 6'3", 6'4". But and I remember doing that when guys would step in the batter's box and they were taller. It was very noticeable because you're right. There was a lot of guys who were kind of like 5'10" to 6'1", and you just kind of get this reference. That's the reference when you're pitching. You see a guy and you expect kind of that same mold. And then when somebody's taller, you're like, "Oh, that guy's pretty." I remember Brandon Larson. I remember standing out a little bit. Big guy from LSU back in the day. But you see Corey Hart, who was like 6'6", taller guy.
Yep.
You don't see a lot of taller baseball
players.
Well,
again, I think
they're pitchers if you see them, right?
And I think it's changing, Paul. I mean, you look at some of the guys that are coming up now.
6'4".
Say that again.
Shohei Ohtani, 6'4".
Yeah. So Shohei's bigger. But if you go back to Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, all those guys, I mean, from the 50s, 60s, and maybe that's just the size of people. Maybe they were bigger than everybody else relatively. But your greatest hitters of all time, even Albert Pujols, I think he was just a touch over 6 foot. I think he may have been listed at 6'1". But some of your greatest hitters, Griffey's 6'3", he's longer. But it's just interesting that everybody wants to get to that size, and you need to get to some size to create some bat speed. But traditionally, your best hitters have not been above 6'2".
Yeah, I pulled up a list. I'm trying to look through some. Tony Clark from back in the day was 6'8", but most of the tall guys are all pitchers, and that makes sense. You create a little more leverage, get a little more arm speed, that sort of thing. So, but most of the tall guys are all pitchers. So, yeah, that's interesting. So, man, a lot of hot stove stuff still to unravel. But like I said, Brian and I are getting excited about spring training just around the corner, and then but a little football game to still play. So we'll be talking more about the not the Pro Bowl, okay, not the I think flag football.
I don't even think they play real football anymore there yet.
I think it's a flag football game now. We'll be talking about the Pro Bowl too. Don't worry for all you degenerate gamblers out there. We'll give you some lines on a flag football game. But we'll definitely be talking more Super Bowl talk. But we got baseball on the mind right now. So hey, thank you for listening today. We appreciate it. Hey, make sure you go out and have a great day.
Out, go Pack.